from one page to another. And it'd be nice if you were able to go back to where you came from. And you can do. There is a back button that gets added as part of the drill through. And if I click on this back button, you can see Control and click here goes back to the previous page. And do that, we get back to our original page. But what if you wanted to make the option more explicit? Well, we can use buttons. Now, buttons, along with other things that we have previously inserted, can be used as little indicators on how to navigate. So if I click on the left arrow button, you can see we have a much thicker, more prominent left button here. So now, if I drill through, you can see there it is. And if I Control and click, nothing happens. After all, it's only a button. I've not programmed it to do anything. It looks like a left arrow button, but I haven't said go back to the previous page. And that's where we can go to the visualizations pane, action. So if I put action from off to on, you can see that there are back, bookmark, Q&A, and web URL. So if I go back, or if I say back, let's see what happens now if I go through this drill through. So Control and click here to go back to the previous page. It lets me go back. Now we don't just have to use buttons for this, although there are some nice predefined buttons. We can also use images and shapes. So these, again, if I just insert a random image and a random shape, you'll see that they too have an action with the same options: back, bookmark, Q&A, and web URL. So, whichever of these you use, whatever it is, it needs to be friendly. It needs to be user friendly so that the end user knows what's meant to happen. So, don't just insert a random shape and assume that people will get it. You can add some text to your buttons. So if I click button text on, we can say go back. So that is even more of a clue. You can switch the icon off if you so wish, though obviously don't switch it off and have no text, otherwise it will literally be invisible. But you can change the shape of it if you so wish from the icon section, and also the horizontal and vertical alignment and line color. So you can have a nice red arrow with a deeper weight if you so wished. So let's go back to my presentation. I was doing various bookmarks, if you remember from an earlier video. So now I can add little icons to allow me to go onto these different bookmarks without having to open up the bookmark pane. So if I just put in a series of small rectangles, these could be images, say 1, 2, 3 and that sort of thing. And in fact, another way of doing this is by putting on a button, dragging this across, adding some text, and then removing the icon. So as long as you've formatted the text correctly, that's another way of doing it. But I'm just going to largely stick to the images, the shapes for now, though as I say, I would probably more likely be using an image. At least I can stylize those a bit easier. And now what I can do is select an action for this first one and say I want to show the bookmark overall, and then the next one I want to show the bookmark 2000 to 2009. Next one I'm going to show a different bookmark, and so on. So now in my presentation I can just click, control and click, that's to say, click, 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 and it gets me to different parts of my presentation without me needing to open up the bookmarks pane. The last action that I'll be showing in this particular video is the action to go to a web URL. So this is a fairly obvious thing. You type in your URL, you type in your tooltip, go to Microsoft, hover over it, and you get the tooltip, but nothing actually happens. So remember, I typed in www.microsoft.com. I've got to put http:// at the beginning for it to actually work. So now when I hover over it and control click, it gets me to the Microsoft website. Now I'm going to click on revert to default, and I'm going to change this action again. And this action is going to be a page navigation action. So this allows me to go to a different page in my file. So it could be that I wanted to go to the bar chart, and I'm going to have a tooltip, go to bar chart. So now if I click on this, you can see the tooltip, I haven't clicked on it yet, click on it, and nothing happens, because it thinks I want to alter it. Instead, in here, the Power BI desktop, I have to use Control and click, and that takes me through to the bar chart page. Now the action I want to concentrate on in this video is the drill through action. I'll have a look at the other actions in later videos. So let's add a button. I'm going to use a right arrow button. Now the sixth action that can be used specifically for buttons is drill throughs. So we had a look at drill throughs in the last video, but instead of having to click on a particular item and right and click and go to drill through, we can use a button to do that. So let's have this button with drill through. We're going to our destination. Now there's only one destination which is enabled for drill throughs. So unlike the page navigation where we have every single page bar itself, you can't go from page 1 to page 1. Here we only have the destinations which are drill through enabled. So I'm going to drill through enable using region name chart. So I've currently got Greater Manchester selected. So if I control and click on this, we get through to region name with Greater Manchester. If I change this to Merseyside, we get to Merseyside. Now, if I don't click on any particular item, then you'll see that I don't have any ability to control click on it and go through to a report. It says I need to select a single data point from region name first. So notice what happens to this button when I click on region name. It becomes enabled. And that's important because we have got an enabled tooltip and a disabled tooltip. So you can see that there are tooltips automatically added, but I'm going to now say click to go through to the region name. And the disabled tooltip, you need to click on a region name above first. So here I'll click to go through to region name, and if I deselect all of these region names, then you need to click on a region name above first is shown. Now you'll notice that there is a difference in the color between enabled and disabled. And There's also additional things you can do. It may be that you want a different color when you hover over something. Well, we can do that in the formatting. For example, button, text, icon, outline, fill, and this isn't the case for things like shapes, it is specifically for buttons. So if I go into any of these, you'll see that there is a default state. So this is your standard state. So I have my button text actually saying nothing. I'm going to have it say default. But this isn't necessarily just the default state. There are other states as well. And one of these is disabled. So if I click on disabled, I can change the text. So let's change the text to disabled. So we have a default state, we have disabled, we have hovering. So I'm going to say hover. And we also have press as well. So I've only changed the button text, but you can also change the icon. So if you wanted it to be, when it's disabled, blank, you can do so. You can also change things like the outline, the fill, anywhere where you see default state at the very top, you can change. So maybe I'll have for the on hover a different line color. I'll make it red. So let's see what we've got. First of all, we have got our disabled state, nothing happening. So I've said no icon and I want the word disabled. Now I'm going to click on the region name and you can see that we now have our default state. If I hover over it, then we now have our hover state, and you notice that I've asked the line for the button, not the arrow, to change color. So there are other things I can do, of course. So in the hover state, maybe I want a different arrow. It's got to be something that is going to be reflective for the end user to be able to go, oh yes, this is what it means. And then when I click, you can see that it says the word press. So I need to control click on this particular version to get through to the region name. So equally on this go back, I can change the default state, I can change the hover, so when we're hovering over it, let's have not the button text, but the icon change to a color blue, for instance. That's the default state. Let's change that back to red, and let's change the on hover state to blue. Default means this is what all the others will be initially at the very least. So when it's not disabled, when you're not hovering like this, and when you're not pressing it. So in this video, we've had a look at buttons, but we've also had a look at actions more generally with images and shapes. Hopefully, you are forming ideas into your head about how you can help the end user of your reports be able to navigate to other pages or to drill through. But there's one action that I haven't had a look at.